So there's 3 layers that I like to focus on in astrology. One being the house. There's going to be 12 houses. The second layer is the planets. And then the third layer is the signs of the zodiac. So we're going to start off by looking at the first house, which gets us, I like to ask these in forms of questions. So the first house being, who am I? How am I emerging into the world? This is like, I like to think of an egg. Like if you have, say there's 12 eggs in a nest and they're cracking, each one will have its different way of cracking. So Aries is going to be shooting through very direct and first and wanting, you know, coming out first and being bold and fast and hard. Taurus is going to come out probably tasting the eggshell and moving very slowly and sensual and you know, yummy like, wanting to have a sensorial experience of coming out of the egg. So each of the signs is going to have its different way of doing that. That's the first house. How are you engaging? How are you meeting the world? This is also where our rising sign is. So this is something that we are constantly learning how to do. Second house is, I think of it as a house, as your body being the house, and all of the things that are required for embodiment. So money, your home, food. Some people think about this as your sense of worthiness, being worthy, or your sense of worth in being a human. Each of these houses can go in so in depth. So I'm just going to go over the top layer of the houses. Third house has to do with information. The way we take information in, what we consider to be interesting information. It's how we learn. It's also, you know, we learn through lots of different ways. So traveling, reading has to do with our perceptive abilities. The fourth house is home and roots, what you consider to be home. This is family life. Fourth house can be linked to your childhood home, your home of origin, where you're from. And I like to think of the fourth house as the nest you emerge to. So at the end of the day, it's like, what is your nest? It's going to be different for everybody. And the nest you emerge from. So when you're shooting out into the world, this is the nest and the way that you emerge from that nest. The fifth house is the house that has to do with childlike innocence. Oftentimes people will talk about the fifth house as your children. I think of it as your inner child and the way that your inner child is expressing on the center stage of your life. This is also where we create things. The sixth house is like health, wellness. It's a lot like Virgo. So each of these, first house, it's like Aries. Second house is like Taurus. Third house is like Gemini. Fourth house is like Cancer. Fifth house is like Leo. Sixth house is like Virgo. Has to do with health, wellness, those mundane tasks that are sacred to keeping you healthy and well. And so when I say like Virgo, be very clear that it is not Virgo. It is, the houses are the areas of life. So the sixth house is that area that has to do with your mundane tasks, your health, your wellness. The fifth house has to do with that area of life that has to do with your inner child and the way that you express your own childlike innocence and wonder and creativity in the world. The fourth house is the area of life, which is like the nest you're emerging from. And the third house is that area of life that has to do with how you perceive information, what you consider interesting information. And the second house is the area of life that has to do with your body, embodied well-being, your sense of worth, what you value. It's the area of life that has to do with how we take care of our physical bodies. And the first house is the area of life that has to do with the way that we meet the world. So just to be really clear about that, because a lot of people do talk about the houses as the signs, and it's a different thing. The houses are the area of life in which the Maya, or the drama, the play of life, where it is, the area of life that those things are taking place in. So moving now from the 6th house. So these first houses, 1 through 6, are very much about the self. It's very much where we are learning about ourselves, we're taking care. It's a very, as you can see in the chart, it's below the surface. So over here is the horizon line. This is the midpoint. So like noon, this would be the high point in the sky. This part would be the like below the surface. So once we have fulfilled those not fulfilled, really got a handle on 1 through 6, those areas of life that have to do with our basic needs. Once we've really cultivated a mastering of those things, now we're able to move into connecting with others. So this is the next half of the chart, or I'm not splitting it up into halves like that, but the next part where we get into the 7th house. 7th house is where we relate with others. This is where we are able to look directly into the face of another, see their eyes, and be able to see divinity through the eyes of the other. Now we're able to connect with another being. So the 7th house is often called the house of relationships, and specifically intimacy, the intimate relationships, where you're going to look in the eyes of the other and tell the truth about your life and listen to the truth about their life. So from 7th house, now we move from 7 into 8. The 8th house has to do with intense emotions, sexuality, really deep death, where, have you ever been with somebody during a time where either actually they've physically died or been on their deathbed in some sort of a way, been with somebody? The way I like to talk about this with my Scorpio friends who are able to really handle this material is talking about holding the guts of somebody. It doesn't have to be somebody you love. I used to be an EMT. This is the 8th house is something that I am very feel very connected with. And it's a scary place. A lot of people aren't interested in blood and guts. And this is the 8th house, death, rebirth. This is the place where if we've been able to cultivate the 7th house relationship with a beloved, that we're able to move into the 8th house together with somebody, meaning that you're able to be a doula, a midwife for them giving birth, or for them leaving their body and going into the next phase of whatever is after the body takes its last breath. Okay, so from the 8th house, now we go into the 9th house, which I think of as spirituality. This is where we study with a guru. We basically, studying with a guru is how we find our own inner guru. It's our own inner light. And now there's I want to talk about the polarities. I won't get too much into it, but I really need to say it for the 9th house, because the 9th house, where I mentioned spirituality, we're seeking enlightenment. It's in opposition to the 3rd house, which is where we are learning about things. We're curious. It's our perceptive abilities. So in order to fully go into the 9th, we need to have really cultivated a very good understanding of the third house, which is how we learn and how we perceive information, the way we're going to pull information in and then put information back out into the world. So all of these houses work in polarity with each other. So let's move on to the 10th house now. The 10th house is our a lot of times it's where the midheaven is. A lot of times, not always, sometimes it's in the 9th or the 11th. But midheaven is our contribution to the world, the way that we are seen by our community. And I like to think of 10th house as, let's go ahead and do the polarity here too. So 4th house being the nest that we emerge to at the end of the day, and how we've nurtured ourselves and taken care of ourselves. And then 10th house is how we go back out into the world. And it's how we're going to show up, what we look like in our careers and what we're choosing to do and who we are to the corporation that you work for or to the community that you are in service to. So that's the 10th house. 11th house is like your community. And so if the 10th house is your career, your role in the community, who you are to the people that you're in service to or working with, the 11th house is your, it's like a social network, like who are the people that you are socially involved with. And it sort of reminds me of, like, I live in this ocean town, beach town, I guess you'll call it. It's called Ocean Beach. And within this community, it's like, it's within a huge city, but it's a small little pocket. And when, you know, if I go to an event, I know everybody there. I'm mostly everybody there. And it's because that's the community that I live in. And within that community, I have a specific role. There's sort of like an overall, who is that person? And then when people point like, oh, that's Anjani, they have a certain, like one word line to like a box to put me in, which is sort of like that role that I am representing to the community. The 11th house also has to do with friends and the community, and then the, you know, within here, and then it grows larger and larger into your global community, what you represent within the mythos of all of humanity. We all have a resonating thing that we, so I like to think of this 11th house like all the archetypes we know, and then the way that you, if life were a mythology, as it is, a storyline within multiple storylines, who would you be in that story? So that's the 11th house. 12th house has to do with the collective consciousness. So if I mentioned in the 11th house, community, global community, like the larger community, and then I mentioned the mythology, the myth of our time and who you are in that sort of like gets really big, you know. The 12th house is the collective unconscious or the collective consciousness. I'm not really sure why we use the word unconscious, collective unconscious. I guess it has, not I guess, I know that it has to do with dreams. And I think now that I'm saying the word, it feels very disempowering, unconscious. It feels very disempowering because it's collective consciousness. It is that universal thread of consciousness that runs through us all. And to call it an seems like we're unaware of it. And even though we may not have it at the forefront of our mind all day long, it is there. It is a huge part of who we are and how we are all connected to each other. So rephrasing that, 12th house is the collective consciousness. And I think of this sometimes as that deep dream state. That is one phrase that I like about the 12th house is that You are dreaming the collective dream, so that when you're having your night dreams or your daydreams, there's some very seductive, yummy, comfortable feeling of like bliss, ananda, that washes over my body anyway, when I have that sense of complete unity with the whole of being, with the whole of consciousness. And that's the 12th house. A lot of people will talk about the 12th house in a way that I don't personally like, because of that unconscious. A lot of people will have this as a place of drunken, chaotic, irrationality, which it is those things, but it's not only those things. So there's the 12 houses. So we're looking at those 12 houses as the places in life. And now also I want to mention about the 12th house, like if you're in an actual house, the 12th house would be like the basement or the attic. And it's the place where there's lots of information collected and stored, and isn't necessarily at the top of our mind. We've put it somewhere. So just like in our body and our mind and our soul, our psyche, this is the place where dreams are emerging from. This place where dreams are emerging from into our awareness, like where did that really come from? You know, and I see that as that one stream of consciousness that runs through the crown of the head, the base of the spine, connecting us above and below, and connecting us with all of the cosmos and the earth and each other. Okay, so those are the houses. And I think I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here and get into the placing the planets in the houses in the next video. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.